Folks, good evening. We'll get started on this talk. Apologies if I kind of stutter or look a little confused by this, but I've not said these words out loud since August in this order. So hopefully I'll remember it and hopefully they'll come out in the right order. This talk is about curating a developer experience, which is slightly different to creating, as you'll see. And fortunately, Ethan's given me an incredibly good introduction because there are many, many parallels and overlaps with what I'm going to cover, although I'm not really talking about advocacy or relations, but I am talking about developer experience. So, my name's Andy. Hello. I really like Kubernetes and I really like YAML, so this is me as a Kubernetes resource. I work for a company called Flutter, not the mobile application framework, the online sports betting and gaming company, based all the way over there on the other corner of the road. Home to some of the biggest brands in sports betting and gaming. And I spend my time as a principal platform engineer, which is a very grand sounding title, building and running and maintaining Kubernetes clusters. That's my day gig. So I'm going to talk about developer experience, but as you'll have heard, there are various interpretations and some variation in what that can actually mean. It's a bit ambiguous, that term. So for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to kind of set expectations of what I think developer experience is and was 5 years ago when we started on this work. And I'll elaborate on that in a minute. So developer experience, for some people, it is about productivity. For some people, it's about portals. Some people, it's about something called platforms. It can mean different things to different people. I'm going to explain to you what my definition is to set the context of this talk. But there is, or has been, over recent times, a lot of hype about developer experience, particularly coming out of a company called GetDX, who focus mainly on developer productivity rather than developer experience. But they, working alongside Nicole Frosgren and other academics, so people who've worked on State of DevOps Report, Space Framework, and other frameworks for measuring successful implementations of technology, they've produced frameworks for measuring developer productivity. Now, I'm personally not sold on developer productivity and developer experience being as tightly coupled as these reports and research shows, but it's really compelling. The numbers they are producing would indicate happy developers are more productive. But I personally think if you aim to create a good experience for your developers, they are, as a byproduct, as a side effect, productive. And that's my take, and that's the way I look at it. And all this research is really recent. It's all new, particularly the DX4 stuff that came out earlier in the year. It's all brand new, it's all shiny. What I'm going to tell you about today is creating or curating a developer experience, but starting in 2019, when we didn't have any of this. Nobody had written this. There was the DORA metrics were a thing, State of DevOps was a thing. I think the Space Framework was in its infancy. And really the only thing we had as kind of like a North Star for what we were doing is this Evan Bocher quote, which is basically describing a platform as a collection of tools and services organized into a compelling way. So that's kind of like the where we were heading with what we were trying to do. So what were we trying to do? Why were we trying to do it? And who the heck are we, anyway, when I refer to that? So I'm going to start this journey back in 2016. And in 2016, the world was obviously a little bit different. And the main thing that people were talking about at conferences was running containers in production, because you were a maverick, a bleeding edge, cutting edge company if you were running containers in production in 2016. This was new technology. Docker wasn't particularly old at that point. And thinking of even running containers in production was seen as something very new. So at work, we wanted to do that, but we didn't want to do it in a maverick and a cutting edge fashion. What we wanted to do was we wanted to do it in a stable, managed framework that would run and we could offer production services for our users on. So this wiki page on the screen here was the initial kickoff document for future platforms. You notice on here there's no tech mention, there's nothing really about containers. And in fact, it's really talking about sort of business problems. So the grey text in the middle says, outside of the squad there should be no humans involved in the value stream between feature and customer. So when someone has an idea, how quickly can they get it to market, but do that safely and in a managed way, and not in a risky way. And that's what we were trying to build. So the team was put together to investigate the various options to build a platform like that. At the time, we were predominantly based on VMware infrastructure and infrastructure as code. That was the tools of choice, with some CI on top of that. But what were we going to do next? That's what that document's asking. So some POCs were formed. There was a small team put together to investigate various options, look at technology options, assess how they worked, assess the overhead of running them, as well as whether they delivered features. And that team settled on Kubernetes, which I think was a very good choice. But this is, again, 2016. You know, Kubernetes is still pretty new at this point. I'm not going to go into the technology of the platform, but I'll give you a quick one-sentence overview. It's based on Container Linux. At that point, you might know it as CoreOS, Container Linux now. And it used a bunch of the technologies along with some Terraform. Originally rolled out in AWS because there was no EKS, there was no GKE, all those things hadn't been invented yet. And things like KubeSpray and a couple of other tools were quite new and really weren't ready for production. So own tool chain was built. We did it the hard way, to quote Kelsey Hightower. And it was later rolled out on-prem as well, using pretty much the same code base. And even today, the code base is still largely based around that architecture, nearly a decade later. So, it was built following the platform as a product paradigm. So, didn't build it in isolation, worked with a customer. When I'm saying a customer, I mean a development team. So this development team wanted to run stuff in AWS, wanted to run in containers, work with the platform team to build out that function. Because building platforms without a customer is a recipe for shelfware. Don't do that. So that all went very well. We've got a running service in production and a customer. Over the next couple of years, that grows. The journey, the experience of running workloads on Kubernetes is gathering pace. The development teams seem to start preferring it to the virtual machine and infrastructure as code setup they've got. So a lot of people are finding they can deliver their products quicker without the friction of raising tickets for network load balancer storage, all that kind of stuff. Okay, yeah. Cool. And that continues to grow. We get more and more delivery teams using our stuff, and by 2018, the team's become a shared service now. It's moved out of the Bet tribe, it's moved into infrastructure, and this is great, this is a success. Loads of people are using the stuff. And it's around this time I joined the team. I wasn't involved in all the original stuff. And I was very surprised when I joined that team that although this is a success, the folks in the platform team aren't particularly happy. It's not a particularly happy place to be. It turns out growing pains are a real problem for this team. The code base, the clashes with pull requests and mergers, everything's kind of mono-repoed. It's not a particularly nice way of working. So it becomes apparent that we need to make some changes not only to the architecture of the system, but more to the ways of working and how the teams interact as well. So what we do is we break this team of engineers into 3 sub-teams and give them particular functions. So at the far end, we've got the engine team. So they look after the Kubernetes infrastructure, they update it, they patch it, they build new features for it as well. And then we've got what we call the capabilities team. So they're looking after the functions that sit on top of the platform for automation. Things like automating load balancers, networks, DNS requests, storage, logging, monitoring, all those kind of functions are handled by this capabilities team, separate from the core engine. And then we decide we're going to do an experiment because there's a whole lot of toil in this team. We're going to try and reduce that by creating a team that works with the end user developers. We call them customer experience, but our customers are developers. These are teams building apps. These aren't our end users placing bets. So we could have called it developer experience. I'll call it developer experience from now on in. So we've got a developer experience team. It's 2019. No one else has done this in the business. It's an experiment. It could go awfully wrong. And if it goes wrong, you know what we'll do? We'll just pivot. We can do this safely. We're given like buy-in by the management to do this. So we're an experiment. We're going to see how that goes. So I got the opportunity to head up this team with a couple of engineers, the DevX team. It's 2019. What do we do? Good idea. What do we do? We've got a blank sheet of paper. As long as we stay accountable to management, we can practically do anything. But what's the right thing to do? So, following my background at DevOps, well, what do we do? Well, what did the DevOps community do? Well, they did a survey, didn't they? They baselined. They measured the state of DevOps. Now, we can't measure the state of DevOps, but what we could do is find out what the users think of the container platform as it is. The state of container platforms, as it were. Let's find that out, measure it, and at least we've got a baseline then, which we know whether we can improve it or not. And then when we review this or work with management, we can see whether ourselves as a team is actually adding value and improving. So we create a survey. Creating surveys is really hard to do it properly. I'll go over some advice about that later on. But what we do is we want to create a quick survey to fill in. We want it anonymous, even though we do ask people which area the company they work in. And we send this out to around 500 engineers. Now, not all of them are using our platform at this point. There's probably only a couple of hundred. And we get 31 responses, which is above 5%, which we were hoping for. Obviously, we want 100%, but we're being realistic. Sending out a survey. We get 31 responses, over 5%. We're happy with that. The survey itself, as I say, is anonymous, but we do ask people which area they work in. And we ask them which features and clusters they're using. So which of the handful of clusters we've got, be they test or production, they're using, whether in AWS or on-prem, and which are the features. So the automation for load balancers, DNS, logging, monitoring. What are you using? Which of those features are you using? So we're getting some idea of which of the capability features people are using. And then we introduce these things called usability statements. Now, usability statements are, I find doing X on the platform easy. Do you strongly disagree, agree, strongly agree? We don't give them a middle ground on that. You've got to fall on one side of the fence. And these prove to be super useful in assessing the improvements that we make over the years. And I'll go into all the numbers when I show years on years comparison. But as a spoiler, we get some really, really glowing feedback. Even the freeform text, which we asked for, there's loads of like really positive stuff. And we celebrate this with the team as well. This is a really good reason to like share this with the team and get people knowing that they're actually doing a good job. Now, we do get a couple of like, maybe not negative, but certainly constructive. And to be honest, they're telling us stuff we already know, which is our onboarding process is pretty complicated and our documentation is rubbish. We know that ourselves, if we're honest, but we know we've got to improve those. So, we now know what the users of our platform think of our platform. That's good, that's a good start. But what are we going to do? What do we do? What do we do with that information? And as a team, what do we do? So one of the smartest things we did, and we didn't realise at the time, but we just thought it was a good idea, was we created a goal, a mission statement. Now, some of you will recognise this as an OKR template, an objective and key results. I didn't know what one of these was in 2019. I do now, but I didn't then. So I just thought this was a good framework to express what the team was there to do. And as you can see, I've got it as engage, empower, and support our customers. There's some kind of tangible things there we can do, some objectives, and some more work-specific ones at the bottom. But this was super useful to do because it meant as a team, and a new team, we knew what the hell we were there to do, why we existed, And also, if we were given things to do, we should fall under that remit, or we shouldn't be doing them. They're not actually a DevX thing. So that was really useful, so everybody knew what the heck it was we were meant to be doing for our day job. Now, we've surveyed all these users, and we want to empower, engage, and support them. Who are they? Who are our users? Now, we know the ones that used to wander up to our desks and interrupt us and ask us questions. We know the people who ping us on Slack, but actually, who are these users? So, in the company, we've got an automated help desk system which everybody uses. So if you've got a problem with a service, you go on a particular Slack channel, there's like a /help command you do, and you can create a help request, and that will summon a support engineer from the right team that will be placed into that thread, and you will be able to share the problem and hopefully diagnose it, and then close off that request using another command inside the Slack channel. In the background, all of that dialogue, all of that information about that help request goes in the Jira ticket. Now, nobody really goes in the Jira ticket. It's just there as a record of work that's been done as a support request. But what we realised is that as a team which had been running for 2 years, we got 2 years worth of tickets of help requests, which is really valuable because first of all, we can reduce a bit of toil, we can mine them and pull out like frequently asked questions and produce a doc and put answers. We haven't got an FAQ document. Let's do that, let's reduce some toil. So we did that first of all. But anyone that's raised a request using this tool must be a user of our system and therefore a customer or a developer. So suddenly we've got a list of names of who it was which was using our platform. So this is great. We've got now a couple of hundred names of people that must be our customers. What do they do? The tickets don't tell us that without kind of analysing them. So we did something which seems kind of childish, I think, now, but it worked really well at the time. We went scrabbling around all the various wikis in the organisations for the teams and found org charts. Some of them were even up to date. Incredibly impressive. And we printed them off as big as we could, multi-page A3, and then glued them together in big posters and stuck them on a whiteboard. Okay, bear with. And then we marked on these charts using the advanced technology of green whiteboard pen, green, it's important, and we marked on who had raised the help desk ticket. And suddenly we could see on this map which teams in which areas of the business were asking for help. And we'd already started doing some rudimentary training at that point, so we marked on in red, because red's training, who'd had training, and suddenly we could see who was using our stuff, who had had training and wasn't using our stuff, maybe they should start using it, or people that were asking for help that had never had the training. And we could also see areas of the business that wasn't even using our stuff, and in the spirit of sales and marketing internally, we could actually use that information to go and target users to go and ask them to use our stuff or give them the training, and hopefully they'd consider adopting it. So we created a really, really primitive and basic form of customer relationship management system, a CRM. But it was really useful because we knew who was using our stuff suddenly. We knew who our customers were. Then we have to do the thing which we as techies aren't very good at. Now we need to go and talk to them. Yes, we're actually going to go and speak to the people using our stuff. I know you probably don't want to do it, but we were brave and we did that because I don't know about you, if you've ever been in a technical interview and anyone has ever asked you what your meeting etiquette is like, or are you good at keeping minutes for meetings? I don't think anybody's ever asked me that. But it turns out, and it might just be the development teams I work with, I don't think we're as good as we could be at that kind of thing. And in many teams I've worked with, I think sometimes things getting done off the back of technical meetings is more by luck than judgment. We don't tend to put agendas together. We don't have a scribe. We don't produce notes at the end or put follow-up actions. So I think sometimes we get stuff out of technical meetings more by goodwill rather than judgment. So What we wanted to do was change that with talking to the teams. So we formalised things a little bit. So first of all, we arranged a regular schedule for the meetings. We had 4 tribes that we work with. So we created a monthly meeting with each of them. So 4 meetings a month. We went monthly rather than 3 monthly because we wanted to get that engagement going. We wanted to create something going, and we kept that going as well. And the policy for the meeting is it's open door. Anyone can come to that meeting. Everyone from the tribe is invited, but anyone from around the business can come to it. We don't want any blockers to say, no, you're not allowed to come to this meeting. Anyone can come. But the actual format of the meeting, we have a structure to it. So we have updates and follow-up actions from the previous meeting. Then we have updates from the container platform team. So we'll share any updates coming to the platform, any like deprecations, any new features, any enhancements to any of the capabilities on there. And we'll use that as a way of communicating what's coming. We then ask for feedback from the people from the tribe. What have you been using it with? What have you had any problems? Have you had any blockers? What can we help you with to make using this platform better for you? And we also start doing things like a little bit of capacity planning. What have you got coming up? We're a sports betting company. We have major sport events throughout the year. There's a chance there might be more capacity needed for reasons for new workloads, or there's certain marketing happening on certain products and services that run on the clusters. So we get some idea of upcoming work, so we've got some visibility of that. And then after the meeting, we write all that down. Boy, do I wish we'd had AI companions back in 2019. But we document who said what. So what were the outcomes from those follow-up actions we discussed? What did we say about updates coming from the cluster? What did our users say that they were having problems with or needed help with? And what are the follow-up actions as well? And we tag everybody in it. And we publish these and make them visible so anyone can read them. Now there's 4 good reasons, if I can remember them, of why we do that. So firstly, if you're in the meeting, you could see what was said and you can also just have a recap. Secondly, if you weren't in the meeting and you should have been and somebody's tagged you in a follow-up action, you can see what you've been delegated to do because you weren't there to say no. The third reason is we take this back to the team and we discuss it with the capabilities team and the engine team and go, this is what our users are using it for, this is what are coming up. And what we might do at the back of that is we might put engineers in contact between the 2 teams to help solve a problem. We might even second someone into that team if it's a real gnarly problem. But also we'll put backlog items into the backlog. So if there's any like, oh, that's a good idea, we should make that particular thing do that. Let's create a ticket for that, we'll do that. And maybe more of the bigger stuff, that goes as a roadmap item, I guess, planned in. But the fourth one, and the most important one, is we're an experiment and we need to be accountable to our boss. And by publishing our notes in public, he can see what we're doing and can understand if we're actually adding value or not. So we do that. We did do some technical work though, because we are engineers at the end of the day. So in that first year, we did some improvements, some automation around our onboarding process to make that a little bit slicker. There was lots of bits of code that needed to be glued together and referenced in different repos. We put some automation on that to generate the code, so some template and stuff there. But the main thing we did was around ownership, because over 2 and a bit years of organic growth of a Kubernetes cluster, that very well-meaning spreadsheet that used to have all the namespaces and who owned the workloads in it didn't get updated quite as often as it should have done, and it's now completely out of date. So we went through the very painful process of working out who owned the stuff on the clusters. Now, I won't say that was easy or time-consuming, and there may have been some disagreements between teams about who owned what, but we got there in the end. And what we did was we collected which tribe it belonged to, which squad it belonged to, what was the namespace, and what's the Slack channel we need to use to get hold of you if there's a problem with it. And then rather than putting that in a spreadsheet like we might have done, we put it as metadata on namespaces as labels inside the Kubernetes cluster. So that was a source of truth. And we could use that programmatically. So the first main use case we had for that was we had some issues with logging, capacity of logging, because particularly on test clusters, it can get very noisy neighbor syndrome. If one workload goes haywire and starts generating loads of logs, that can block the flow of logs for all the users on the cluster. So we sharded it by tribe, and we created effectively an individual pipeline per tribe, and we used the metadata which we stored on the namespace to inherit that onto the pods, and then when the logging software saw a log line, it knew which tribe that belonged to and would ship it to the right logging pipeline, an endpoint for that, so we could kind of unblock that. So that was really useful, but it came in handy for so many other use cases, and I'll share those with you. Okay, so that's the end of the first year, and I said when we put the survey out, we had these usability statements. So we sent out a survey in 2020, and we got 25 responses. Now, bear in mind, we got 31 in the first year, but you'll remember July 2020 was a bit different to July 2019. Yeah, it was, wasn't it? And quite rightly, communication was used as a priority for people's health and well-being rather than merely understanding adoption of Kubernetes clusters. So, yeah, we got 25 responses, which we'd like more, and there's more users of the cluster as well. Again, the free-form responses we get are really positive. The usage is up on all the stuff, but the usability statements, and if you remember what the usability statements were, I find doing X on the cluster easy, strongly disagree, disagree, red, agree, strongly agree, green. And if you look at the results year on year, you can see, well, some are better, some have gone backwards a bit. There's been a bit of a resurgence in using the VMware infrastructure, and also our documentation is taking a bit more of a hammering. So, but there again, some of them have gone up. So it's kind of like, well, nothing's gone bad, but we're not really improving that much based on these usability statements. So, into our next year, 2020 to 2021. And we change our focus a little here. So, in the first year, we've been very much about talking to our customers, saying, how can we help you get the best out of this platform? We start twisting the narrative a little bit here and trying to create a sense of shared ownership and responsibility. So we start talking about how can we all help make the cluster good? How can we all be good users of the cluster and look after it rather than it being just us looking after it for you? So to do that, we need our developers to do the right thing. What is the right thing? Well, let's write it down. Let's work it out. So we worked with the teams to produce some best practices. I'll do that in air quotes because I know people don't like the term best practice. And what we do is we work with the teams to pull together this list of what good looks like for a developer on our cluster. And we put together these we call them we ended up calling them standards. So these standards, and we categorize those as Moscow, so we got some sort of priority on there of must, should, could, and would. And we collate those and edit them together. We didn't write them. We heavily encouraged teams to put them together, but we took them from the users of the cluster rather than us decreeing what good looked like. We got them to tell us so that they would be more committed to these standards. And we broke them down into 3 areas: build, deploy, and run. And what we realized was the run ones, we could kind of codify. We could use something called OPA and then something called Gatekeeper to basically assess workloads against the run standards. So we had about 20 different standards, if you like, which we could measure the workload against. We couldn't do the build ones, and we couldn't do the deploy ones because those were on systems which we didn't manage, but the run ones we could kind of assess, and we could use these rules to flag up statuses of workloads. Now, you can, with these technologies, block workloads. We didn't do that. We are gardening, not policing. But what we wanted to do was feed that back. So we wrote an exporter which would take the status of those of these rules for the standards, and it would populate our metrics database with information about each of those standards. And then we could dashboard it. And because we had this information of tribe, squad, and namespace, we could group them all together like that. So we could slice and dice the quality of the workloads by tribe or by squad, or if we wanted to just do it for a particular standard across several squads or all the tribes. And it was really powerful. We had a way now to understand if anything was on the cluster that was likely to perform suboptimally or cause problems for other workloads. What we also did was we started doing some rudimentary cost stuff as well, because Excel spreadsheets are a way of communicating costs. I'm sure that's what the FinOp movement says. But yeah, so we've got a retrospective monthly report. Guess what? It's broken down by tribe, squad, and namespace, because we can use all that metadata we've got to pull usage information and combine that with the cost data and produce these reports. And what that allowed us to do is in the meetings, as well as going through our existing pattern of previous actions, follow-ups, updates from the container team, updates from the customer, and writing up follow-up actions, we could start bringing some data in there. We could start talking about quality of workloads. We could say, well, let's look at the standards, these compliance standards, look at the metrics for them for your particular squads. You've got some here, which are, like you've got workloads, for example, running with the latest tag. That can be really dangerous if someone pushes an image and updates the latest tag. You can get an involuntary live deployment if you do that. You should be using like a tagged version with some sort of ID or version in there, probably semver. But we could talk to teams about that kind of thing. We could also talk to them about workloads costing more. You do know this workload has increased by 20% in cost. Is it okay? Is there something wrong with it? Wow, what's going on there? And we're heading in the direction of going into SLI, SLO, and SLA for the SRE folks in the room. We never got there. But again, at this point, we are gardening versus policing. We are not enforcing rules. We are not telling people to go and fix things. We are discussing them with the users of those workloads in the meeting and creating a shared responsibility and understanding of what's in the cluster. Our survey said, your documentation is terrible. So we thought we'd better fix it. It was not fun. It took ages. There were 534 documents, I know, because I did some of this work. And we completely restructured it by maintainer and by user and broke it down into per product as well. We removed the duplicates, we updated the out-of-date stuff, we took away anything which wasn't relevant and wrote lots of new stuff, and we were really pleased with the end result, but it was a heck of a lot of effort. So what did that do to the numbers at the end of the year? Well, with an incredibly advanced statistical analysis technique I call, ooh, look, there's more green. Oh, look, there's more green. But we can see we've definitely improved on things like the documentation, which is really good because we put a lot of work into that. And we're starting to see that things are improving. And we're back to 30 responses. But that's still quite low. We've got lots more people using our stuff. We're not necessarily seeing as many responses as we'd like to, and that's indicative of something, and I'll explain what that is in a bit. And again, we're getting nice words from people who are using the stuff. Okay, into the next year. Time for more gardening. Encourages the teams to keep on doing the right thing. So, how can we encourage teams to do the right thing? We'll make it easier for them, give them better tooling. So the first thing we do is get rid of that horrible cost spreadsheet and start trying to produce some real-time cost metrics. So we build something that yanks the cost report data out of AWS, throws it into our metrics store, and then we have a process which will divvy that up based on the usage metrics by tribe, squad, namespace. You get the idea. And basically, we can produce near-ish real-time cost metrics across the AWS clusters. We don't do this on-prem, which is much better than having a spreadsheet which is instantly out of date and only a handful of people actually know exists, let alone can see. And we stick that metrics data and the dashboard in the same metric store and the same dashboarding system as the developers build their dashboards on. So we're trying to get that data near to them as they can so that they can use it if they want to. Speaking of using things as they want to, we discovered teams were actually starting to use our numbers. So those compliance metrics I mentioned before on doing the right thing on the cluster, we found the team had a bot which they wrote, which ran in their SRE channel and would highlight any changes or alerts which are problematic. But they also pulled out any workloads which had like a severe compliance issue, like anybody running with the latest tag, etc. We didn't even know they'd done that. We discovered that quite by accident. We were really pleased. And I haven't mentioned anything about developer tooling as such. rightly or wrongly, when we built the cluster back in 2016, we didn't really see it as our job to tell teams how to run their SDLC. So over time, teams were copying what other teams had done previously or building their own solutions to deploy workloads onto the cluster, which in hindsight could have been better. But out of this, we found that the DevOps teams within inside the tribes had got hold of this problem and were building frameworks for their devs to use on top of our cluster. So there was a Golden Path initiative started in the Bet tribe. It was basically a Helm chart, some base images which were dated regularly, and some standard dashboards, and teams could use that tool to build their own pipelines and build their own deployment for their applications, and that got really popular. One of the most compelling reasons to use this, though, was the team that put this together went and talked with the SLMs and said, if we do certain things with this setup for this Helm chart, and for how we lock it down with things like network policies, can we pre-approve certain steps of our acceptance into service process? So by using this Golden Path framework, developers had less admin to do. And that's really compelling because it means that you've got just less red tape to do to get your work approved to go live. So that was a good reason for that. And as I say, we didn't write this. This was done by another team. We obviously work quite closely with them because they're one of the people that come to our meetings. But they built this framework and then they made it in the source and it got adopted across other teams as well. So that was a really good win. I mentioned training briefly before. I think one of the key successes for the platform is the fact we went out and we trained people. So we offered a couple of courses on that, all built in-house, all run by us. And there was an initial workshop which basically build an application and stick it on Kubernetes. And you built that, and there was a day's workshop on that. You wrote all the YAML. We made it hard so that people would learn the inner workings of things like replica sets and deployments. And then after they'd done that, they'd be able to build an application. Then we had a follow-up which we did to that. And we'd already been doing that before we started doing the DevX stuff. But the advanced training was the follow-up to that, where we gave teams an application, access to our test clusters, and we taught them how to deploy an app, how to add monitoring, add storage, network policies, a bit of load testing, load balancers, and a few other things as well. So that by the end of doing those 2 one-day courses, most engineers would be proficient enough to be able to build something which was ready for live, with only minimal hand-holding from ourselves as the platform team. We did a kind of a more academic version of that, which was more the theory side of it, but without getting your hands elbow deep in YAML for 2 days of your life, which ran for a couple of hours. So it's kind of all the theory we did there. Always did a follow-up survey. 507 people been through those courses. You could argue that's actually more 250 something because most people have done the basic and the advanced course. But it's still nearly 3,000 people hours of training. And we always sent the survey out afterwards to ask people what they thought. And the Net Promoter Score was always like way above 90%, always way above it. So our training courses were really, really popular. At one point, we had another team which was doing our training courses. We had a tribute act inside another team. They were doing our training courses with our training materials, saying our words, but we weren't doing it. That's how popular it got. So, end of 2022. Look at all that green. We've nearly greened all the things. As I say, statistics is hard. So this is great, but 19 responses. That's not so good, is it? That's kind of telling us something. So, as we go into 2023, we pivot again. And this might seem quite counterintuitive based on the talk Ethan gave and the fact that some of you may be thinking about starting up your own DevX team with inside your organisation. We decided that we're going to stop doing that. And what we're actually going to do is we're going to stop doing the DevX thing. We're going to move it to more of a BAU function rather than a dedicated function. So this is the beginning of 2023. And there's reasons for that. We no longer, if I go back a slide, this was how things kind of worked when we started in 2019. We spoke directly with development teams. By the time we got to 2023, these tribes have got platform teams or DevOps teams that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting. And we're speaking predominantly to these teams, not to these end engineers as much as we were. I'm saying we're not talking at all. And what that meant is that we were seeing the same kind of things. We were talking to the same people about the same problems repeatedly. We were getting to the point where we'd kind of done all the easy wins. We were getting diminishing returns. The meetings were becoming very Groundhog Day. We're talking about the same minor points. We weren't talking about big things anymore. And it basically meant that the teams that we were working with had matured. And we'd matured a lot as well. We were much more operationally focused than we'd ever been and much more stable with our platform than we ever were in the early days. And I think it's just a side of an organisation just getting better at doing this stuff. So these DevOps teams now, they've built frameworks. They've got their own documentations. If things went bump in the night, they knew how to fix it. They weren't as reliant on us as they were many years ago. So we weren't really getting the returns out of doing these meetings. So we stopped. So that's qualitative metrics. What about quantitative? Let's have some numbers, Andy. Let's justify these numbers and the impact of what happened. So this graph here is, it's not great. I don't have great metrics for this, but I have some metrics, okay? These are the number of help desk requests we used to get on a weekly basis. I've obviously blurred the numbers out on the side. But what you might expect in 2023 here is if stopping doing the DevEx thing was having a negative effect, then surely the help desk tickets would go up. They didn't. What about the number of, which one's this? Excuse me while I try and remember my talk. What about the number of CPU reservations? What about the actual usage of the platform? Is the usage of the platform going up? Now, apologies I don't have the numbers from the beginning, but that was like 5 years ago. So this is the number of CPUs we are requesting on the clusters. Now, if the amount of workloads were going down, then surely we would have seen an uptick in the need for developer experience. Keeps on going up, kind of doubling every year. So it's 20% a year. So we can see that there's still more stuff on the cluster. But you might say, hang on, is it new stuff or is it just more of the same? So if we look at the number of namespaces created, we're still getting namespaces created at the same rate we were if we ignore the peaks. You know, it's not dropped off with the number of applications being created. So this idea from the metrics that by stopping doing the DevEx, if that had been a problem, we'd have seen either less adoption, less usage, or we'd have seen more help desk tickets, to give you some quantitative analysis of that. And that's kind of the takeaway. I think by doing this DevEx, we've created a bunch of experienced developers and platform engineers as well across the organisations that can build and run this stuff and know how to do it because we all got good at it. And I think the DevEx was part of that as well. So I'll just quickly go on to some things which are planned and are in planning. As I say, our cluster architecture was conceived in its infancy, getting on for 8-9 years ago. Things need to change. It's getting old, and we're looking at building a newer platform. I can't say too much about that, but there is something happening, and we'd hope to go live as by the end of the year. Let's just put that as an aspiration there. But that means we're going to be working again with the same users, but we're part of a bigger organisation now, so we've got potential for even more users. But we're not just going to have a handful of clusters which we manage. There's going to be multiple ones of those spread across the organisations. And we're going to be working with not just our own internal function to run all this stuff. We've got a team that handle all the AWS stuff. We're going to work with them to not manage all of our AWS infrastructure ourselves. There's a team that run an observability platform. We don't need to run our own observability stack and monitoring stack anymore. We can integrate with that, and that would be good because obviously telemetry across the whole organisation and all the different stacks would be good. Service management, we've always worked super tightly with our SLMs, but they've got a capacity function that helps them plan for big sporting events. Well, we can teach them how to do that on Kubernetes, not just on the infrastructure they've currently got. And there's a team there at the bottom, which is slightly mangled by the PowerPoint toolbar bar, called Developer Experience. There is a team there to build all those pipelines and deployment infrastructure, which we didn't originally and have manifested into like the Golden Path, etc. So there's a team that kind of does all of that user engagement and builds all that infrastructure. So we're going to be concentrating more on the Kubernetes and management of multiple clusters. So that means all of that stuff, which is shiny and new, we can start leveraging that. We can start using some of the ideas and start measuring developer experience in a better way than, ooh, there's more green, and have something that's a little bit more quantitative and a little bit more based on current ways of thinking. So it's exciting times to be able to leverage that. So I'm going to wrap up now. So things we made and did. This is a timeline of what we did. A lot of them are very much coming from an individual contributor perspective. My team was that. We weren't, as Ethan was alluding to before, maybe at more of a strategic and a tactical level. We're very much engineers, what can we do to make stuff happen? Very much from that sort of grassroots approach. And that's what we did from the grassroots approach. Obviously, we're talking always to our management and making sure that we're not going off and doing anything crazy or doing anything that's obviously misaligned with the objectives of the business. But they're the things we did. And just one more kind of, I suppose, opinion piece. I've seen some teams try and emulate the successes we were having. And I just wanted to iterate that this was a job full-time for me for 4 years and the rest of the team. So dabbling in this might seem really easy. And what I would hate you to do is to see some of the ideas I presented on the previous slide and kind of half do them and do the wrong thing well. So things I've seen is a token effort, a developer experience, where they might put a survey out, they might send some emails, and then they kind of get bored with it. It takes effort, it takes rigor. There's repetition there, there's effort that needs to go into it to make this thing happen. Slack channels are no replacement for going and talking to your users. 3-month quarterly meetings are no replacement for going and creating a regular cadence with the users of your system and going and talking to them. You get much more out of it than that. And I've seen teams kind of cop out and use Slack channels and talk every 3 months. Training, best thing we did. We got loads of engagement and involvement from the end user developers, not just the DevOps teams that we worked with, right across the organization. Screen recordings might sound like they're a more reusable and more efficient use of your time, but they go out of date so quickly. And creating really good screencast recordings is really hard. And keeping them up to date is even harder. And I've seen people put a load of effort in begin, and then they just kind of rot with like documentation. They're never kept up to date. And then when people look at them, the interface doesn't look the same. It's changed. I don't really follow it, and people drop off there. Surveys. Surveys is actually like, it's a job for some people. Research is a job. Analysing this information is a job. I think we did all right as a team of techies doing that. But if you read Accelerate by Nicole Fosgren, there's a whole chapter on there in building unbiased surveys and analysing the data. If you've got a research facility or some form of statistical analysis kind of customer feedback team within your organisation, use them. They know what they're doing, and this stuff is hard. It's not as easy as just throwing together a survey and wanging it out in an email, because you only get one chance at that, and if you don't do a good job, then you're not going to get the value out of the survey. And then finally, these two down here, these are my favourite. They don't know what they want, but we know what they need. And I've seen lots of teams. If you see your customer as a problem and give them names like Pebcac or Wetware, then you probably shouldn't be doing DevX. If you get requests for your stuff from a user and your first instinct is to go, how much? Why do you want that? Then maybe DevX isn't the right thing to do. So seeing your customers as a problem isn't really the mindset you need to make this stuff work. And then we tried everything. They won't listen. They don't want to engage. Well, 2 slides back, I gave a massive list of stuff we did, and it was hard work. And you've got to try at it, and you've got to keep going at it, and eventually you do get the results by creating that engagement. So it's a job. Sadly, this isn't a technical problem to solve. It's a socio-technical system. It's a people problem, not a tech problem. Tools are easy to build and deploy, and we like to think by building or deploying a thing, it's going to solve a problem. It might help, but it's probably not going to solve the underlying problem. So I'm sure there'll be a tool of vogueness at the minute. Just deploying that out and telling people you've installed it, now go and use it, isn't necessarily going to solve your cultural issues. Build tooling that matters and actually helps your users. I suppose the awkward one is beware of when you've stopped adding value and know when to stop. Speaking of which, I'm done. Thank you very much. I don't know how long I was, Ethan.
Any questions?
Yeah, questions. I'll start with you at the front.
What's your new baseline?
My new baseline.
Obviously, you're doing some new stuff.
Yeah, so at the minute, we've kind of rolled it into BAU, so we're not measuring anymore. We're treating it more as, we're being a bit more more proactive about it in the sense that we have a lot more operational maturity internally. So we've got a lot more internal reviews to understand what customers are doing. So what we're doing at the minute is we will usually go and actually talk to customers and tell them about problems we're seeing with their workloads rather than waiting for them to come to us. So we still have metrics on help desk requests, which are not going up. We're not really analysing those on a statistical basis because the throughput of those and the impact on work isn't causing a problem. So not really doing any, but we'd be aware of indicators if they were, and we probably would look at that. So there was one over there at the back.
Yeah, it's kind of plugging onto your last 2 slides. You talk about this full-time job. One thing I have noticed with a lot of these presentations, especially around DevOps, they always fail to mention when they have a successful journey, how much resource and bodies were actually thrown at the problem. Because I've worked at a number of other places where they kind of tried to do this,
Yeah.
and massively got wrong the amount of effort they needed to
Oh,
put
yeah.
into the amount of resources. And yeah, some ugly things happen.
Yeah, so we had a team of 3 originally, myself, an engineer and a grad. We worked together for about 2.5 years before slowly they started moving on. So by the end of it, I was doing basically all myself. But that was probably that attrition was probably right with the amount of effort we were putting in, because obviously we could see the diminishing returns as well, and the numbers were indicating that as well. But yeah, you do need to understand that this is a job, and the company needs to commit to that as well. But again, that's also demonstrating the value back to it as well, and making sure that they're not reducing that for you. Okay, cool. One at the front here.
Just kind of off the back of what you just answered, how do you get a company buy-in for a 9-year strategy?
Well, so we were always an experiment, so we didn't. We got it in for 3 months. There was never really like a timescale put on it. I think we'd have known internally if it wasn't working. As you could see by the fact we were sorting out the logging and we're sorting out we were doing technical work as well, so it wasn't just all meetings and writing Jira tickets. We were actually doing stuff as well. So long as we were improving things, and I would go to my boss and I would say, like, we want to sort this out. We think the onboarding's rubbish. We could put some template in around the onboarding process. Is that all right? And if he'd have turned around and gone, actually, I don't think that's going to help too much. What I think we should be asking is looking at this as a possible solution. We'd have done that. So having a great boss that understands that and is prepared to give you that amount of, freedom is great. And also, it was always a case of, if this goes wrong, we will pivot. We will just pull you back into the engineering teams and we'll do something different, or we'll just completely change what we're doing. So it was always like, that safe way of doing it. It wasn't kind of like you deliver or you're out kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
Like in your presentation, you mentioned how at one stage you would have leveraged AI if it was
Oh, yeah,
available
yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So going forward, is that something you envisage that you would like to embed into your team?
If we were still doing it, so what I found, and this may be just me, the things I found that I didn't like about the job were the admin. And one of those things was typing up the minutes from the meetings. Now, you can develop certain strategies to do this. So we got 4 meetings with 4 teams. So generally, all 4 of them got the same update. So I didn't have to rewrite that 4 times. And also, we only have like 1 time updates anyway. So I would ask those. And I worked out from watching some consultants who were in how they minuted as they went. So I would split my screen by having the Zoom call at the top, and I'd start typing in hybrid, like the action points, as I was in the meeting. So then at the end, I wasn't going, what did I write? What did we say? I hadn't written it down, or I can't read that. I'd actually written it down. I could then just expand out the points, and I learned that from watching over the shoulder of a consultant who came in, who was helping with the system. So you develop strategies for that, but if I could have pressed the button that just said, give me the minutes, oh, that'd have been heaven. Yeah. So they'd be the kind of things I was doing to help with the more administrative side of it and the kind of, the toily stuff, I suppose. Sounds like we're done.
Thank you very much.
Cool, thank you.